itself. When we talk about joint congruency. So, for example, let's have a look at my friend here. We're talking about. Don't read too much about the names of the bones and all that yet. Okay. So this is what they call the femur bone. It's your big thigh bone. There are two knobs here that you can see one is bigger than the other, right? The one that is attached or articulated or associated with like the hip socket. The hip socket is called your acetabulum. All this is also in your notes itself. Or the acetabulum is your hip socket. This particular knob that is articulated. So when I use the word articulate, really it's just a fancier word of saying like connecting. Connecting, right? Connecting or works with. Okay. This particular the head of your femoral. This is your femur bone. So this will be called your femoral head. This is called the greater trochanter. Obviously, it's bigger, so you call it the greater trochanter, and this is the smaller or the lesser trochanter. Sorry. So as you can see, everybody's going to have very different shapes of your acetabulum, all right, and also very different shapes of your greater trochanter itself. So depending on what shape it is, how shallow your acetabulum is, and how deep it is, you will find that the experience or the shape itself will feel and look a little bit different for you than maybe with the person next to you or your peer or your course mate itself. Now, the joint surfaces here and here we call them joint surfaces. So for example, this is one joint, for example, your greater trochanter, and this is your other joint, your acetabulum. What's surrounding the joint itself and here, we call it the articular surfaces. So the surface where it connects. Your articular surface, the articular surface itself, right, where it connects, has a very smooth, slippery, silky material called the cartilage. Everybody has seen a chicken bone before, I'm sure, right? When you see a chicken bone, especially where the thigh is, do you notice, can you remember that where the thigh is at the head of the bone itself is quite smooth, right? Can you kind of remember?
Translucent.
Yeah.
Translucent.
Yes, and translucent. That's the cartilage. All right. When we get older, this cartilage sometimes, due to wear and tear, okay, can wear and tear, and that's when arthritis sets in. Okay. And if you, so everybody here knows Anna, right? Anna was the Italian lady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she has a lot of knee arthritis because her articular surfaces have worn down, and so then she had to go for surgery to drill holes in the surface of the joints so that it bleeds. And then the bleeding, what happens is that when it recovers, it grows not the exact same material as the cartilage itself, but a material similar to help pad all your movements between the articular surfaces. Now, why is that important, or why is joint congruency or stability of the hips important? It's the same thing for the shoulder as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. Is that when the joint, what we're trying to do is to get maximum connection or articulation with the two joint surfaces. All right, because what we're trying to do here is that how nicely a joint fits into the socket itself. It's to increase the surface area of stress. So imagine you are, when you don't stabilize your hip, for example, let's say you're in Warrior 2 right now. When obviously it will take many years of accumulation for anything to really happen. But in Warrior 2, for example, if my right hip isn't stable, I'm putting the stress on a small area of the surface itself, right? So when you put a lot of stress or bear weight in a small area of the surface, instead of using the whole area to bear weight in it, what happens? You're stressing a small area of the joint surface itself, which means that a lot of the weight is not being spread out and shared where the joint surface is. you know, like, so for example, like a bed of nails, right? We've all seen that happen before. When a person lies on a bed of nails, because his whole body weight is supported with different nails, right? So many, like hundreds of nails, that the body weight is spread out evenly. Right? However, if I put one nail, it's very dramatic obviously, one nail on the ground, sticking up, and then ask you to lie down on it, what's gonna happen? It is probably gonna be a little bit less comfortable than having a full bed of nails and you lying on it. So it's the same thing as stabilizing your hip. It's the same thing as joint congruency. We want to share the load, all right? We want to share the load of where the joint surface articulates with each other. You're sharing the load. So then the movement, all right, focuses not just a small area. When you move especially as well, it really uses the entire surface itself as a stress point. Not just one point, but the whole surface itself. All right? Because when you put too much stress on just one point and not the whole surface itself, in time, it can cause, again, like arthritis, like degenerative problems in the body itself, like in the hip or the shoulder. It's the same thing. We're gonna look at a downward facing dog again in a little bit, but it's the same thing too. So some postures, some asanas in the practice itself will sometimes move your joint out of congruency. It will destabilize your joint, right? So then what do we have to do? Mindfully work our way in so that we're able to stabilize the joint, make sure that it has full, articulation with the joint surface itself. You're just spreading the load and sharing the load here. Okay, any questions? Okay. I think next, maybe in a couple of weeks or so, when I talk about arm balances, I'm going to work a little bit more on the shoulder and also the humerus, like the upper arm articulation. However, because this week and the next week or so, we're going to be doing a lot of work with sun salutation and also your downward facing dogs and your upward facing dogs. And all this requires you to have your hands and your arms that's going to be active. So we want to ensure that we're able to replicate the same joint congruency, the same stability of your hips with the shoulder. Now if you look at this, I named him Boney M, but I don't know Boney M. Right? If you don't, yeah, just Google it. Okay. Look at Boney M's arm and leg. Even look at yours. They are like a reflection of each other. No doubt your leg is a lot bigger and your arm is a little bit shorter and a little bit smaller, but the same composition, right? You have the femur bone, you have your humerus, you have the elbow joint, you have the knee joint, right? You have your, what you call the tibia and your fibula, and then you have your radius, you have your, oops, okay, I have a loose screw here, no worries. You have your radius, and then you have your ulna, and your radius. Okay, so the thing is, and then you have your hands, and then you have your feet. You have your metatarsals, and then you have your phalanges here. They're all a reflection of each other. So whatever you experience in your lower body, you want to experience in your upper body as well. Okay, put this here somewhere so that you don't fall out of it. Okay. All right. So just check this out. If you can't see again, just make sure you move to a position where you can see me from all sides. In your dog pose. Okay? So let's look at my legs first. I bend my knees. I bend my knees so that I'm able to create this tilt. Another thing I like to inform you is that your spine has a lot of different curves. You have the lower, you have the sacrum, that is a fixed and fused 5 discs together. This doesn't move. You have the lumbar here, which is curved, it's your concave curve inwards. And then you have your thoracic, which is convex curve, and then you have your cervical spine, the neck, again, which is a concave curve. The spine, the lower back, the cervical spine, and your lumbar are both what we call lordosis. Your lordosis in your spine itself. Lordosis. Okay, and then the thoracic spine, which is the spine that convexes out, and your sacrum is what is called kyphosis. It's also in your book itself, some of it. Okay. So basically, when we move in the body, or in any positions, remember Tadasana? Tadasana keeps the natural curves of your spine, so that when you move, you want to make sure that the natural curves of your spine stay intact. A lot of us tend to lose a little bit of our lordosis because of, we sit so much these days, and then you're sitting in an armchair that slouches you down. It doesn't really allow you to, find the natural curves of your lower back anymore, which is what a lot of our practice these days, for a lot of us, is to bring the lordosis back in your lumbar, is to recreate or bring back the natural shape and curves of your spine. What's the easiest way to bring especially the lower back curve back into your body itself? Bend the knees, like in Utkatasana, right? Your lordosis is here, but obviously in Utkatasana you want to also make sure that you're still using the lift of the pelvic floor. Once you lift the pelvic floor up, most of us, we don't want to go too far that we lose the lordosis. We're going to keep the lordosis, but move the rib cage in as you pull up the pelvic floor just enough so that this is stable and balanced. Okay? So when you're in your Adho Mukha Svanasana in downward facing dog, it is the same thing. I bend my knees, right, to create the tilt of my pelvic bowl forwards, this way. Okay, when I tilt my pelvic bowl forwards, my lordosis increases. I keep that. And then my sitting bones lift up to the sky. That instinctively helps me lengthen my hamstrings a little bit better. Now I keep all this, and then I start to draw my rib cage in and lengthen my tailbone down, lengthening my legs out a little bit longer. Now, from here, when I bend my knees, when I start to straighten my legs, and this happens, what happens? Okay, look at my lower back. Okay. This compared to this.
Oh, the curvature of your spine changes.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. My pelvic bowl, my second variation, starts to tilt back. We don't want that. We want the pelvic bowl to have a slight tilt forwards, because that's almost quite naturally how you will feel when you're standing up without moving your body at all. So you're trying to keep your pelvic tilt natural and the curves in your spine natural as well. Okay? Now look again. When you're here, my sitting bones, where my hamstring attachments are, like right here, your ischium. Okay? Tip my pelvic bowl forwards. My sitting bones are already lifting up. Now I'm going to keep my sitting bones lifting up. Now for some of us, if your hamstrings are very tight, as you start to straighten your legs, you'll lose it. Then your arms will feel heavier and your legs will feel a lot lighter. So for some of us, if your hamstrings are still quite tight, then keep the knees bent but squeeze the thighs in. If you feel like your hamstrings are a little bit more open after a week or two, then maybe start to lengthen your legs up without losing the shape of your lower back. So this rather than this. Okay? Now the same thing happens for your shoulders as well. For your shoulders, create the same awareness of joint congruency with the shoulder joint. From here, alright, what am I doing here? Where do you feel
the shoulders are not relaxed?
Yeah,
no, they're
my
pressing
shoulders
in.
are relaxed, and then the head of my humerus is more or less moving more forward rather than back. I'm trying to stabilize my shoulder joint so that I'm not just putting stress on one little part of the joint itself, but in the whole articular surface of both my, what do you call this, your glenoid, which is the socket, and also your humeral head here. You want to plug this in, which is why when you're here in your dog pose, when you draw your shoulder heads back, you're trying to stabilize it this way. not here, this way. Once I pull my shoulder heads back, I'm able to lengthen my spine a little bit longer back as well. So the idea is to stretch your spine long, away from where you're pushing your hands down for your downward facing dog. Remember Tadasana? This is Tadasana, right? Okay? So my shoulders are here, here. This is Tadasana. This is not Tadasana. This is not Tadasana at all. So when you're upside down, so downward facing dog is known as a mild inversion because your heart is above your head. It's a mild inversion. When you're inverting, when your head is under your heart, what happens? Gravity will pull everything down towards it, towards the earth. So when you are in downward facing dog, it's quite, if you're just letting go and relaxing, your shoulders are quite instinctively going to slide towards your ears. So you're going to use a little bit of awareness to draw the shoulder heads back against gravity to stabilize the shoulder girdle itself, to encourage joint congruency. So you're sharing the load with all the articular surfaces itself. Okay, another thing to also think about is since we're going to be doing a lot of downward facing dogs, whenever your hands are on the ground, they are part of your foundation. If your hands are drawn in this manner, what happens is that you lose a lot of, you want to gain more surface area in the mat with your fingers. Is this or this does the trick better? Does this do the trick of spreading the surface, getting more area from under your hands, or this? Spreading your fingers out wide, okay? But also remember that when you spread your fingers out wide too, we're talking about the outer seam of your legs and the inner seam of your legs. The outer seam of your legs are always more active. So is your arms. We tend to put a little bit of more weight on where the outer seam of your wrist joint is. Now, okay, use this other hand. This hand is good, okay. Now, in this particular position here, with the arm out this way, you can see, all right, you can see with a little bit more clarity how the two bones articulate with each other. All right, this is when what happens is that when you're here, okay, when the upper bar or the upper arm is turned or externally turned outwards, all right, you want to ensure that when you pronate your arm this way, the outer seam or the outer, this is your radius, all right. When you turn in this way, your radius rotates like that. Your radius rotates. So this is your radius, it rotates this way. All right? Your ulna stays still. Did I say it the other way? Sorry. Radius rotates this way. So here, this is your radius here. When you pronate, when you say pronate means you just turn your, internally rotate your arm in. The radius turns. So if you can't really remember which is your radius and which is the ulna, your ulna is the one that doesn't move, it's fixed, all right? And it's a little bit smaller, as you can see. Your radius is on the outside, all right? On the outside here, and then it turns this way. It turns this way. If you look at your radius here, it's a much bigger joint than your ulna itself. Like that. So would you want to put more stress on the outer seam where the ulnar joint is because it's a little bit smaller, or to the radius or the radial joint which is a little bit bigger? Or your inner seam because it's got more, it's bigger. The whole bone is also a little bit bigger. The joint is a little bit bigger. It articulates with what you call your carpals here with a little bit more surface area that's moving together with it. So what you want to do is you want to put just a little bit more weight, because instinctively you're going to put more weight on the outer seam of your wrist. So then you want to balance it out by just moving a little bit more weight to the inner seam. You will find that naturally, if you're not aware, you're going to instinctively put more weight on the outer seam of your wrist. So then you want to, just with a little bit more willful effort, anchor down more heavily to the index knuckle and also where your thumb joint is, like that. A lot of you will see too, like a lot of us tend to put more weight here, okay? Now, more weight on the outer seams of your arms are helpful to externally rotate through your shoulders to stabilize the shoulders. However, then all my weight is on the outer seam of my arms now. So I want to keep this stability of the shoulder, but anchor down heavily through the inner seams as well. Now, one thing to think about is this. You have two arms, you have two arms, yes. You have two parts of the arm. The lower part of the arm is going to think about rotating inwards to ground down actively to the inner seam. The upper part of the arm is going to think about rotating outwards to stabilize the shoulder. Okay? It's the same thing for your legs too. When you're in Tadasana itself, when we talk about inner thighs go moving in and back, what happens is that it's facilitated by the shin, all right, or what we call the tibia, and your fibula here. Your tibia is the big one, the fibula is the smaller going here. The lower part of your knee, okay, so the tibia and fibula are rotating more inwards, a little bit, I'm again, over dramatizing it. And then, when this happens, look at how my inner thighs draw in, because my lower body too, my lower part of my leg is rotating inward. So you're internally rotating. You're going to find a balance by now, externally rotating. So it's always a balanced action of both inner and outer rotation. Joint congruency in here. So when we talk about your downward facing dog, that's what you want to look at with your students when they're in this particular shape. Can I get a